All right, welcome to another episode of Moped Outlaws. I'm so excited. Our guest today, Dee Dee, Donald Dunn. Not like what a revealing,
Yeah,
open discussion this is. And I'm so grateful that it's coming to you on Memorial Day.
yeah, amen.
And definitely check all of the links in the post because Donald Dunn is up to some amazing work. And his stories are just so heartfelt, but also inspiring.
Yeah, I really we're gonna have him on again for sure. It was all three of us when we ended. We're like, there's a lot more deeper things and more intimate personal things to go into. But boy, what an entry you all are gonna have. And um in my family, there's a gentleman from the military who passed away, unfortunately, at a very young age. And so, yeah, I just would like us all to honor the people who, as Mark said, I think you said it, your words were, who gave everything for others. That's kind of the core spirit of a military
Yeah.
soldier.
Normally we ask you to like and share all our stuff, but this time I'm going to ask you to take the time and energy to go visit his radio programs and his nonprofit and support Donald Dunn and his efforts to help veterans.
Sis, hallo?
Du zeker wegen dem.
Sitaki ubenza, anikazidi.
Two outlaws on the lam, taking the back roads through America.
You can't drink enough coffee for this show.
And now it's time for Monday Madness with the Moped Outlaws, Greg and Mark.
Let's
Awesome.
fucking go!
Let's go! Here we are with Donald Dunn from the Heroes Voice Media Foundation. Donald, clearly there's a kind of military presence to you, and the work you're doing is related to that. So we're going to start by acknowledging what sacrifices you've made for the greater good, not just for us personally and the country, but the globe, probably. I'm really grateful for that. And we're a couple days out from Memorial Day, so we're definitely want to just acknowledge all of the people who have given everything that they had.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I'm super curious about what stories with Donald Dunn are and what the Heroes Voice Media Foundation is.
First of all, I appreciate y'all having me on. I've been waiting for this moment, so I finally made it to the big leagues. I've made it to y'all's show.
Get ready. We're going to throw some curveballs, some knuckleballs.
All right. Well, yeah, absolutely. So I was in the military. I spent 20 years in the military, 10 years in the special ops community, and 68 months total, 9 in Bosnia, and the rest was split between Iraq and Afghanistan.
Wow.
And I retired in 2014.
10 years.
Yeah. Like most soldiers, man, I didn't start off on a great foot to my civilian life. I came in right out of high school, and when I got out, I wasn't the same guy I was that went in. And I had some tough roads. I probably did the next dumbest thing, and I started a trucking company. I don't recommend starting a business when you're not in your mental thought process, So after I drove that truck all the way in the ground, I then closed that business, and I took a job in Missouri to help take care of my mom and her health. And, I got some help, which is what made me realize that I need to close the business. And then I quit taking my medication and went back downhill. And, then when I got to Missouri, I was finally ready to fix some of my my issues. And since then, things have been doing good. Like I said, I just started a new job, and I wrote a book. I published a book not too long ago. Originally, it was just more of a letter to say, I guess. I wrote it for my family. I didn't want to have a conversation about the things I've done and who I was and why the changes had, but I wanted them to understand what I had gone through. Um, I wasn't doing it as an excuse, but I felt I owed them at least that much. I kind of, after I started seeing things, I wasn't so sure that coming back and telling everybody that it was okay and not sharing some of those details was the most healthiest for myself or my family. Because when I was hitting rock bottom, now they had no reason to even understand why, because I said everything's been fine. My wife knew better. She knew I was lying. There was about 2 years that she didn't sleep in the same bed as me. And so she knew just from the dreams and everything else that was happening. But yeah, so I like I said, I came here, I got some help. Got some medication that the VA likes to throw out, and things have gotten better.
So you were going in the dumpster at the VA?
Yeah, basically.
I'm just kidding. So
Is it
what's
that's
the
what
name?
help is.
What's the name of the book? And is it available?
Yeah, it's you can get it on one of our websites, or you can get it on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, just about anywhere you order books. But it's called Echoes of War: The Silent Transition of a Soldier. Um, I was in the top 100 for the best sellers for Iraq and Afghanistan for a while, but I haven't really had time with the new job and everything to keep pushing it. But I've had some really good reviews. I really, like I said, I really wrote this for my family, and it was my daughter that convinced me to publish it.
Mhm.
And so I went back and I rewrote a lot of it, and yeah, I really got some good reviews. Some family members that said, "Holy crap, this is what's going on with my husband." You know, um, again, I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know if you should come back and tell everybody the things that we've seen. And you can't just leave it as, "Oh, it was bad. So what's for dinner?" You know, they're going to ask questions, and so I don't know what that right answer was. I made that choice, and I live in that bed now, and but that's what it was for.
Well, my former father-in-law was a firefighter at an air base in Britain during World War II.
Wow.
And there were things he definitely did not want to talk about. And what I realized lately is that it's a re-traumatization to have to tell those stories again,
Yeah.
to have to put yourself through the emotional trauma again.
Yes, I would agree. And I heard a veteran, a World War II veteran, say something that has always hit me. And he was asked. It was, I believe, it's actually an interview that's on the beginning of one of the episodes from a Band of Brothers. But he was asked if he had PTSD, and he said, "Well, when we came back, we had some bad dreams, but they went away." And he said, "Well, then how come all the current soldiers that are coming back are struggling?" And he said, "Everybody after us has had PTSD because we fought the last war that actually was worth fighting. And the rest of it was just political nonsense, forcing people to go overseas and do the dirty work that they didn't want to do." And I thought about that for a while, and I said, he's not wrong. All of us, by the time we came back, pretty much knew that what we were told before we left was not the same as what it was by the time we left. And so I do understand that. But at the same token, you know, it's also hard to come back and when you're telling yourself, "I'm fighting this war now because I don't want my kids to have to fight it later." And then, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to give you all the details." And so I never really did talk about it with my family until that book came out. Um,
It's the scenario that Jack Nicholson says in that famous movie where you want us on that wall, your freedom is because we're on that wall. Is there a reality to that there is some truth to you being in these areas like Afghanistan that I get to live the life I'm living in the United States?
I
Because-
I will say yes, but probably not in the way that you're thinking. In my honest opinion, if you're keeping the enemy busy overseas, there's less money to train recruits in other places. There's less money to create cells in your own country. Um, and all that money goes towards fighting the current enemy that's on your ground. So financially, I would say absolutely.
Hmm.
There's a reason why the amount of terrorism that happened in the States went down during the war. And it increased in places like France.
Hmm.
You know,
So I think as three intelligent gentlemen, we recognize there's an element to war that's politics, there's an element to war that's business,
Mhm.
and there's also an element of war that's warrior character, which is fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
In your personal experience, if that was being weighed out, could you give us an idea of what realm? And is that an accurate even scenario to put forth?
No, it is. It's no secret that your big companies like KBR and Boeing and all these major companies, there's money to be made from contracts. A time of war creates money. It creates jobs, and so there is that component. If you as a president was coming in and one of your things was you had to fix the economy by putting yourself into a conflict, you're going to create a boom of economics, not necessarily long term, but you'll get that boost until the government can finally not afford to continue to fund it. But it's more than that though. It's things like, I'm not saying that we were over there for no reason. I seen what evil was, and the people over there there's some evil people. I've had stories told to me by some of the older veterans when the first Desert Storm went off, that they would go into one, for example, he went into a building, and when he went in and opened up the door, he said the door was heavy. He said he thought somebody was behind it. So he jammed the door. And when he went around the door, there was a Kuwaitian woman who was pregnant that had a sword through her stomach stuck to the wall. I mean, you can't explain that. It's one of two things. Either humans are capable of doing stuff like that, or there is something out there called evil.
Hmm.
I don't know what the truth is. I don't know which way it is, but I can tell you it exists, whatever it is.
So, how do you, with loved ones in your life, like a daughter and a wife, hold a reason to live with what you've experienced?
I don't really, I try not to let that stuff kind of dictate. I mean, that's exactly what terrorists want you to do. They want you to change how you think and how you live. And so I don't focus on that. However, I'm also that guy that carries a gun everywhere I go. I'm that guy that is very, I walk into a new place, I'm looking for exits. I'm looking at my surroundings and stuff like that because of what I've seen and what I know. My children are not those people. They walk into a place and they assume everybody's there with rainbows and having great times, And I've seen a different side of what people can do.
Isn't that what we want for them though? Like the whole idea of the class of people that you represent, the warrior class of people, is that the ultimate gift that they then give is the possibility that those kids and the others can be in that space of infinite possibilities and imagining a world of beauty and play and innovation.
Well, here's my thoughts, right? Let's say it did change me in the way I thought, and I allowed it to affect me. And all I fed to my kids was the world's coming to an end. There's evil people out there. We're looking at nuclear war. And all I spoke about that was negative. And I don't know if people notice, but some of these millennials are a little bit different. They don't get married as early. They don't care about their driver's license as much. There's just some differences about them. And I could easily see my daughter, being a millennial that I fed all this to, say, man, what's the use of having kids? We're not going to be alive to see them grow up. And then now there's 4 grandkids that I would have never got to meet, you know? And again, I don't think anybody knows what the future holds, you know? So I don't really discuss politics around my family. I don't really discuss all the negativity that's out there with them. I live every day, and when it ends, I hope I die like that bird that's in the middle of flight and just gave up and boop, you know. And that's where we hit the game, you know, the end of the Pac-Man game. Woo, 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 woo.
Kind of fold up.
Yep.
So on that note, what are you currently chewing on? What's your new gig? What's your new job?
So I'm still in the maintenance for my full-time job. But I dedicate a lot of time to this nonprofit that you see. And I'll give you some background. It's kind of a funny story, and you
Yeah,
can kind of get
please.
that veteran mentality. So all of this started from my original podcast. Me and my old first sergeant, we had a few soldiers that committed suicide, and we just decided to start doing Facebook Lives and bringing all these soldiers that we were still connected to on Facebook into our fold, and just have time to talk like veterans and take our mind, have a few drinks, or a lot of drinks in our case, and do it while we're live every Friday. And so I said, well, we should just start a podcast. And he laughed. He said, well, what should we call it? I said, well, you know, we're doing all this in your gun room. We spend tons of time in your gun room building guns, and we're drinking all the time. Why don't we just call it 2 drunk dudes in a gun room? And that was where the show started, man. And I don't know how we never got kicked off on Facebook. I really don't. I mean, even sometimes we get a little drunk, and stories are coming from from overseas and things that happened and stuff. But you know, we had a good time, and about 3/4 of the way through, I realized, you know, now this is while I was in Missouri, I realized that things was getting easier for me to talk about. And at that point, we were really just talking to other veterans. So when you're talking to other veterans, whether you know them or not, man, everything we've done is so similar. It feels like you know that person for the rest of his life, you know. And so I was kind of getting some help from it, and I was starting to like myself again. And so my buddy, on the other hand, was not going in that same direction. The VA was messing with his meds, and he was having a tough time. And he finally, at the end of season 1, just said, you know, look, if I can't help myself, I can't help others. And he just dropped off of the show. I left it the same name for season 2. And during season 2 is kind of where this nonprofit came from. We started having veteran musicians on the show. And I realized something. I mean, at this point, I didn't care if one person watched my show or 10,000 people watched my show. It was about therapy for myself. And congratulations, you get to be my counselor today. And, you know, it was just a good time for myself and everything else. But I realized that I had a full-time job. It didn't matter to me. These guys that are coming on the show, man, they're not getting paid unless they're getting gigs. You know, if they're not on a stage somewhere performing, there's no money out there. And so I thought, you know, it kind of sucks, man, because even as podcasters, I'm sure you guys, it's hard to get in the ratings, man. You're fighting everybody. And if it's ratings that you're looking for, or in this case, a songwriter trying to get his song known, man, you're fighting 18, 19-year-old kids that have been in music probably since they were 12. and now you're 35, 45 years old. You know, your voice ain't as young as you used to be anymore. And so it's kind of an unfair fight. You know, and I didn't like that because these guys put their dreams on hold. Most of these veterans already knew they wanted to be musicians while they were in high school. That was their dream, you know. I wanted to be a jockey, but my parents told me I could do whatever I wanted, and they were wrong. I'm 6'1", 280 pounds.
You just need bigger horses.
Yeah, I'd had to race a Clydesdale against all the thoroughbreds, you know, and he'd probably still be pissed. But, but you know, these guys were trying to go back to it at the same time, find some therapy through writing about the songs that they lived. You know, the first guest that came on my show was Scotty Hastings, and this is where that aha moment came from. He'd been shot 10 times in Afghanistan, died en route to getting out of there. They went to snatch a bomb maker that had been terrorizing the area and taking out a lot of military vehicles. So they found out where he was at, and they were going after him. And they'd been in this town several times, and unfortunately, somehow they knew they were coming. And there was a machine gunner hiding behind a building, and when he popped out, you know, Scotty got hit from the lower part of his left, right up diagonal across his right. And so he has some nerve damage and everything else. And he decided to start playing guitar. And he had to create a way to hold the pick because of the nerve damage in his hands. And I was just astonished, man, about how far this guy has gone. And all he's trying to do is get known. So I said, screw it, man. Why don't we just start a radio station that plays nothing but veterans music? And I guess my great idea was heard by Facebook because I seen an advertisement after that said start your own radio station for $39.95. And I thought it was that easy. So I did. And then there's this thing called copyright and people getting mad and shit.
FCC.
Yeah. And so I ended up having to turn it into a business to keep it going. And I had a great organization called Operation Encore that kind of helped me. And they ended up sponsoring my podcast, you know, to help me pay for some of the licensing and all that stuff. So we became licensed, and, you know, then I realized, man, it's not just musicians, man. It's authors, it's podcasters. It's important for us to not just use these things as therapy, but to document our stories. And the reason why I say that is because in front of my eyes in these last 8-9 years, I have watched history be rewrote. It has just been changed by people that say we're no longer going to believe this, and we're going to change the name of this base because we don't like that guy and he no longer exists. We're not going to talk about that guy no more. And so history, you know, some long ran history, you know, from like Fort Bragg. I don't know if people's ever heard of the 82nd Airborne, but they go all the way back, and we're just now going to change it to Fort Liberty, you know, like nothing past that happened. And so I don't know what story is going to be taught about our war. And if they teach this war to be a positive thing, then they didn't look at history. Because I can tell you that this war has built some weak leaders. And the way we left out of Afghanistan is living proof of that. I seen and talked to multiple people that was there that day, and every bit of it could have been prevented. It could have been prevented at the top by a better plan. It could have been better at the top by not partnering with the Taliban, the people we've been fighting for 20 years. And it could have been better by giving our leadership more options. You know,
there's a history there that I want to explore with you if we can.
Okay.
There was the initial foray into partnering with the Taliban came in the 90s. And to some degree before that, when we actually enlisted them to sort of fight the Russians on our behalf in Afghanistan. And so there's been this ongoing relationship where we've thought it would be a functional strategy to engage with people who thought that terrorism and insurgency and counterinsurgency was a reasonable way to go about changing things.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to the exit plan, which occurred over the span of 2 administrations. The outgoing administration in 2019 had laid the groundwork for that, and essentially owned the plan from a certain point of view. And then the subsequent administration executed a plan, and then when there was criticism of that plan, that administration suggested that they were not at fault for the failures of the plan because they were the previous administration had designed the plan. Now, setting aside political leanings, I don't buy that argument, because you're the one executing the plan right now. You have an opportunity to modify it.
Yep.
And use the wisdom and insight and intelligence that you have.
Yep.
To do that. And so I'm wondering if you see it like I see it or not.
I do. I see it as, you have advisors for a reason. And if you take a plan that's given to you and you say, okay, I'm going to take this plan and I'm going to implement it. The moment you decide to implement that plan, it becomes yours.
Mm-hmm.
It does not become the person who gave it to you. You had the option to look over it and say, maybe we need to rethink this. And that didn't happen.
Mark and I are big proponents on personal responsibility. And it seems like that's a cornerstone in the military training.
Yep. Yes. And that's kind of that's really what I was getting at with weak leadership. Right. And I don't know how many people followed the hearings, and I don't know how many people watched the Sean Ryan show, but there was a Marine sniper that was on his show that was at Abbey Gate, and they had the intel of the guy that detonated that bomb before he got there. They knew what he looked like. They knew who the handler was. Their informant had been a part of seeing them. He even told them when they should get there. A couple days later, he gets there, and the sniper goes to the British military that was right next to them on the side of the gate. They looked at that person and identified him as the handler and the bomber. He called his battalion commander. He came down and looked at that guy and he said, yes, I agree, that is him. And the sniper said, do I have permission to shoot? And he said, I cannot give you that. And he said, who is it that can authorize this? And he said, I don't know.
So I am unfamiliar with Abbey Gate. What was the result of not taking that gentleman out at that time?
So Abbey Gate is the gate that, as they were trying to get people on the plane to leave, a bomber had blown up and 13 soldiers, military service members, were killed. That sniper I was talking about. So this period is really weird. And I'm going to tell you why, because in the special ops community, we worked, most military worked close with interpreters, but, in our era, we worked with a different level of interpreters. Some of them were even coming from the States already. Some of them were trying to work their way to the States, but you became close to them. They became another soldier, another extension of you. And there was a lot of special operations guys that were in the States saying, hey, my interpreter had saved my life 3 times. He's documented his family's coming. Can you make sure they get on that plane? And that's exactly what happened with that sniper. He was reached out to. He sent some soldiers down there to the area where he was going to meet this interpreter and his family. And that guy ended up having to go somewhere else. And he said, no problem. I'll go down there, wait until you get back. I think it was like he was going to go get some chow or something. And while he was standing there, he found the interpreter. The interpreter looked at him and said, we have to wait for my family. And he said, you know the deal. You were supposed to come together. He said, where are they? And he pointed, and they were like 300 yards behind this herd of people trying to get to the gate. And he said, okay, I'll wait for them. You go on. And then he said, no, wait, you stay here with me because you'll know exactly what they look like. And it wasn't a few minutes after that the bomber had went off and the sniper had gotten hit. They estimate somewhere around 150 ball bearings hit him. He lost, it was either his left arm, right leg, or right arm, left leg. I don't remember which. And all he was trying to do was get that family to safety, and he could have killed the guy.
Yeah. So this is definitely a failure of leadership, but it's unfortunately one of thousands of stories of failure of leadership and lack of vision, a lack of core values. Like one of the things that's happened as a result of the echo political influence on military decision making is that the core values and our standing in the world, the world community, has been impacted.
All right, I'm going to be the dummy throughout this whole conversation. What is echo core politics?
Economic and political benefits of the decision-making process outweighing what we would call the core values of, freedom, liberty, and self-determination. And the idea that someone who risked their life by being an interpreter and living a life in country where they were subjected to their own population, knowing that they were helping our forces, then being left high and dry. That's a lesson that got repeated. It was Vietnam. It was, even in Bosnia, I bet there were some instances of that, right?
Absolutely. We had interpreters come up missing all the time in Bosnia. And it really sucked because, our interpreters didn't live on our base. They came on base and then they went home, which was not the safest thing. But it wasn't considered war. It was considered a peacekeeping mission. And one would just randomly come up missing. And there was no computer systems. There was nothing left. The country had been destroyed. And so you would call these hospitals and say, hey, have you seen such and such? And it would be weeks before if you get a response, because all they had was paper trails. And so they were looking through hand wrote paperwork of people coming to the hospital for injuries or whatever. And the average person probably was just seeing more wounded coming through than it was worth standing there thumbing through a piece of sheet of paper looking for one name.
Did you personally ever have an instance where someone you felt close to, you had to walk away knowing in essence you were kind of signing their, not maybe necessarily a death certificate, but they weren't going to a good place and you had to make that choice?
Not that I specifically had to make the choice, but I can tell you, if you win a football game 100 times against the same team, that 101 time, you don't really think too hard about whether you're going to win or lose. And so the first time I deployed was 2002. Well, Bosnia was before that, but the first time I deployed for this war was 2002. And I was in Kandahar. And from 2002 to 2005, nobody had gotten hurt. Right. And there was a mission that came up. I had left. I had rotated back to the States. And about 10 days into me coming back, those people that we taught how to shoot down helicopters shot down one of our aircraft and killed 8 of my buddies. 2 of them that I was very close to. And have you seen the movie Lone Survivor?
I think I have, yeah.
The aircraft that was going in to rescue the guys that was under fire,
right?
That was our aircraft.
Wow.
So Major Reich, I was just briefing him, on issues 2 weeks before that. He took over as the forward commander. The battalion commander just went home. He rotated back with me for no reason other than it was just our time, and another guy that should have been on that aircraft, but he rotated back with me because the altitudes that we were having to fly to get over the mountain ranges there in Bath was blowing people's eardrums out. And so it was not a great situation because they would have to barely have enough fuel to leave so that they could fly high enough to get over. They took less ammo. They had less people on there, whatever they had to do to reduce weight. And then they would have to refuel to go conduct the mission. And that particular day, we infilled those 8 SEALs into the same place that we infilled the first group. The 4 SEALs that was already there, and there was a guy in that same area that had an RPG, and as they were landing to infill those SEALs, he got off of a shot that he probably could have never repeated again. And as they were landing Chinooks, they land backwards, so the pilots are looking up and the crew chiefs are at the doors counting the feet to the ground for the pilot. And as they were coming down, he shot an RPG. It went into the back of the ramp and hit the internal fuel tanks, and it immediately exploded. But yeah, a lot of great men lost their lives that day.
Now, we were talking a minute ago about how little value we placed on the interpreters and the in-country locals that were part of our efforts. And when you enter into the service and you get trained up and you're about to go out to theater, the government values you at a high level. They've invested a lot of time and energy and resources into training you, and they pump you up and they get you out there and they support you. But then my understanding is that when you retire and when you come home from theater, that it's almost as if you don't exist anymore, that there's a serious lack of understanding of the needs of our veterans when they come back from these wars.
Well, absolutely. At that point, especially if you're retiring or whatever the case is, now you're just a liability. There's no ROI on you anymore. And, it's unfortunate. Everybody gives the VA a really bad rap, right? Anybody that you talk to that says, hey, VA sucks, ask them what VA they've seen. And I promise you, it's going to be a major one. It'll be a big city. It'll be one that has people walking in there like a Walmart door. And those are the ones that you get no help from. You are just a number. I'm just trying to get through this damn day.
Right.
If you're lucky enough to go to a smaller VA, you're going to find that a lot of those people are not there because of the money. They're not getting paid a whole lot. They just love veterans. And they'll bend over backwards for you. That's not the government.
That's the people sitting in those seats. And so we're failing our servicemen and women on the back end of this process. Could you say a couple things? What would be like 2 to 3 things that would make a significant impact on this particular problem that we're talking about right now?
So I think there's 2 parts of that question before you can start to fix it. The first part is to understand that mental health is obviously a problem in the United States, period. Right? Not just veterans, not just rape victims. It's period. There is a mental health problem. And once you accept that, then you start asking yourself, how do I fix this? Right? Well, then it becomes very deep. Right? So you got the VA that's trying to do the same thing that needs to be done for the whole world, just for our veteran community. The problem is one organization is not going to be able to fix this, right? Let's take one problem of this. Let's take veteran homelessness, right? Anybody can go out there and I'm going to build some tiny homes. I've heard a lot of people say it. I'm building tiny homes. We're going to put veterans in them. No veteran should ever be homeless. Okay. What are you going to do when he tears that shit up and leaves? What are you going to do when he gets there and says, you know what? Fuck this. I'm leaving. Because you didn't fix any of his problems. You put a roof over his head. He could have got that at a shelter. he still can't get a job because he doesn't have a driver's license or an ID. He can't get an ID because he doesn't have a birth certificate. He didn't get cleaned off of any drugs he's on. We didn't address anything, the fact that 80% of the homeless have a diagnosed mental health condition. We didn't fix any of that. All you did was put a dog in a doghouse and shut the door and say, good boy. If you don't fix the reason why they're homeless, putting them in a home isn't going to help. And it's too big of a problem for one organization to do it. And unfortunately, as a community, that's one of the problems that we have, is everybody's nonprofit is badass and I can do everything. If, anything that people need, if they would just recognize who's doing it better, and partner up with them. My part of it is, if you can sing, I'm going to help you find a job. I'm going to help you find a gig. I'm going to help you document your story. If you come to me and say, I'm thinking about ending my life, I am going to send you to somebody that I know from my podcast that I have interviewed or I have used personally. And I'm going to stay with you until you're with them, because they do it better than I do. And I think that is the first step to it. And we're going to see the day where it gets fixed for veterans, because it's veterans taking care of veterans. And once we learn that we can work together, we can be a squad, a platoon, a battalion, we don't have to be an individual lone soldier.
So it sounds like command and control on a larger scale, where we integrate all of these individual efforts into a comprehensive process.
Yep.
What would you say are the key tent poles of that process? What are mental health, clearly, substance abuse, right? But what do we have to do as far as resources to actually deal with that mental health crisis? We have to start growing more psychologists, right?
Well, yes. You have to have people that can do two parts, right? And this is another reason why I think that the majority of the VA therapy doesn't work. You guys said it earlier. Part of the key is you have to hold the people responsible. All right. I fucked up a lot of things in my life, from the time I got out to me sitting right here. Right now that I'm thinking clearer and I look back, I'm like, what the hell was I doing? That doesn't, just because I had a problem doesn't mean that I'm not responsible for fixing those things. Okay, I've addressed the problem. Now I have to start working my way back. I have to first deal with the underlying problem. And that is the fact I don't even love myself anymore. And if I can't love myself or even like myself for what I became, why should I expect you to forgive me? I haven't forgiven myself. Once you do that, then you can start unpacking the things that got you there. And that means you're going to have to talk about it. Writing that book really helped me, man, because now I had to write from, it wasn't so as hard to write it for my kids as it was to write it for the regular people out there that don't know me or don't know my story, because now I had to write it like I didn't know my story, and it made me evaluate myself.
Mm.
And man, it was tough. I stopped writing quite a bit. From my show, I found a for-profit company that deals with mental health that I ended up joining. It's called the Warrior's Way Mindset. It's an amazing group therapy program. It's only for men. And if you're a female and you got problems, they can refer you to somebody. But man, it did wonders for me. And that was the reason why I picked the book back up and continued. I didn't like the guy that I was writing about. I had to relive the fact that I threw my son out of the house the day after of a hurricane because I had anxiety. There were so many people in my house and we were cooped up for 2 or 3 days. And by that third day, I was just about to explode. And when that happened, it just caused me to look for a fight. And I knew once I got that fight and tempers reared, I would feel better afterwards.
Hmm.
And it just so happened to be when I came back from a walk that my son and my wife were upset at each other, and I just jumped in it. And by the time I'd even realized what I'd done, I'd already told him, "Don't fucking come back." You know,
Got it.
I didn't even know if he had a house anymore. He didn't know if he had a house.
How old was he?
22.
My dad gave me 48 hours to leave the house once, and I did. What's your relationship with your son like now?
It's a work in progress. You know, over those years, man, after what I realized from writing that book and redoing this, I didn't hate my son. It was my son looked and acted so much like me. I hated me, and it was like looking into a mirror. And so I took everything out on him, and that was just one day. You know, I was not capable of making mature, good choices. Everything had to be decided now. And I remember coming back off the road when I owned my trucking company. And I got back and he drove my truck when I was gone. He didn't have a vehicle. And the truck was broke. It wouldn't start. I don't remember what was wrong with it, but it probably had nothing to do with anything that he did. But instantly I lost it. And I got pissed at him, told him, "You're never going to drive any of my shit again. And I'm tired of fixing this truck because you don't take care of it. You break it, blah, blah, blah." And I instantly got on Facebook and found somebody that had a 92 Camaro, and I traded him straight across. I gave him a $10,000 truck for a $2,000 car, all because I was mad at my son, who probably didn't do anything wrong in the first place.
Mm.
You know, and my whole life was like that. It was everybody around me walking on eggshells because they didn't know what version of me they were going to get.
Boy.
You know, I would come home from work, I would go in, have dinner, and I just spent the rest of the night until the next morning in the bedroom. I just didn't want to be around people. And, you know, it got really bad towards the end because just going home was creating anxiety because I knew I was wrong. I knew the problem was me by this time. And there was times that I felt like there's going to be another blow up. And I would lie to my wife and tell her, "I'm not going to make it home. I ran into some problems, going to run out of hours before I make it home." And I'd spend the weekend 35 miles from the house and then go back out on the road for another 6 weeks. Just because I knew if I went home, the anxiety of being there and everybody coming in, walking in, and I wasn't going to be able to deal with it.
You know, you're speaking to an existence that's living without a home. And even though you weren't homeless, in essence, you're homeless. And I think one thing you and Mark have touched on is that's a profound experience for most vets coming back from the theater, as I learned from Mark today, that you're coming back to what's supposed to be your home, your homeland, and it's not. That's a very hard existence.
Yeah, it's tough, man, because, you know, ask yourself that. I don't know if you realize this, but most veterans, you know the one thing they hate hearing, most of us anyways,
I don't.
"Thank you for your service,"
Yeah.
because we don't know what to say. We're not even proud of some of the things that we now have seen as things have played out. And you're thanking me for something that I didn't do necessarily for you. I went in 94 because I got fired. I needed a job. I had a wife, you know. I got a lot of respect for all these guys that volunteered after 9/11. They knew what they were coming in for. I thought I was going to get some college money. I didn't think I'd be in there for 20 years. Deploying never even crossed my mind, you know. And I just learned that staying in was the best choice for me each time I said I was getting out and then reenlisted. But those kids came in knowing what they were getting into. And it's tough, man.
As we talk today, do you have a home?
Yeah. I now I feel
Yeah.
I have since then figured out how to forgive myself. I'm not 100% there yet.
Right.
You know, I'm still on medication from the VA. I want to get off of it. You know, I do believe one of the ways for that to happen would be psychedelics. Um, I do take functional mushrooms that do help with a lot of things. I have recently been able to think clear enough to understand that I don't necessarily believe that all my diagnoses was all PTSD. If you start looking at TBI and PTSD, those symptoms, especially rage, is very, very, they run side by side.
What's TBI?
Traumatic
Traumatic
brain.
brain injury.
What is it?
Traumatic brain injury.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you say functional mushrooms, you mean like lion's mane and stuff like that, right? And so you notice that that helps you regulate your nervous system.
It helps with another problem that I have, which is the other reason why I also wrote that book. Is I'm starting to lose a lot of my memory. A lot of times I'll find myself telling people stories about what happened, and then halfway through it, start questioning myself: was that Iraq or was that Afghanistan? Was that 2002? Was that 2003? You know, things like what did my kids like when they were kids? You know, I don't know. You know, what was their favorite shows? What was their favorite colors? You know, I'm not 100% if you put my daughter and my son together in a picture when they were both 6 months old that I could identify them. You know,
One of the things you said was that you have a curiosity about using psilocybin therapy or MDMA therapy, which we've been reading a lot about lately. And I'm wondering if you have met other veterans, other service personnel for whom that has worked, and if you can tell us a little bit about the direct personal experiences that you've got awareness of.
So absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the people that was in that group therapy that was with me, they did it, and you know, there's keys to anything, man. You have to consider it as medicine, not recreation, right? You know, my pills all have a direction on it. It says take one in the morning, take one at night, whatever, right? Well, you know, all I can speak with is psilocybin. I've had one lady on my show from that did MDMA, but it's so different. I couldn't really explain how that works. But with psilocybin, it's more ceremonial, right? And you take this and you're going to have a journey, a vision, right? That you may or may not understand when you come out. But the chemistry of what's really happening is PTSD is not a physical disease. You don't have a virus. You didn't get hit in the head and have a physical injury. So how the hell did it happen? Well, it happened from something in your life that took those brain fibers that are all woven together to make you believe the way you believe and rewrite it. Right? No different than why is a military guy so different? Why can I look at a guy and watch the way he walks and tell you that he was in the military? It's because they trained you and they took that brain chemistry and wired it to make you believe a certain way. What's really happening is psilocybin is increasing the amount of blood flow to your brain. And what they have found is it rewrites your brain, right? You may not always have a good experience, you know. There you have to prepare your body to do it. And the things that you're going to see a lot of similarities. You're going to see people that go in drinking and coming out not having the desire to pick up another drink. That's a real common that's happened with multiple people. You know, you're going to see people go in and come back and now they're going to all of a sudden find religion because they've seen God during their journey. They've seen things that probably wasn't there, right? And there's another reason why there's a lot of people that believe that religion came from psychedelics. That a lot of the people in Egypt and so forth were seeing things and having journeys And I'm not saying that none of this stuff exists. It may be allowing you to see a part of your brain that we don't normally use. I can't speak on that. What I can tell you is it knows somehow what it is that you need to figure out. And it's different for every person.
And so you've got direct experience with people that are former servicemen that have had positive results as a result of this.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What's holding you back from doing this yourself? What do you need in order to take the step to the next step for you in your healing?
The place I work not to fire me because I pissed hot.
Ah,
Do you know that they don't test for psychedelic mushrooms?
I don't know enough to know what it is or even how long it stays in your system.
Well, they don't test for it. The typical drug test for is going to be looking for opioids and amphetamines.
and marijuana.
I didn't know that it wasn't one of the panels.
Yeah, so do the research, find out about the panel.
Well,
Yeah.
Mark, are you encouraging him to take the step? Is that what you're doing right now?
I'm encouraging you to get the healing you need, and I've heard from multiple sources that the psychedelic ritual, when it's combined with a therapeutic container, which is managed by people who you can trust, meaning veterans probably who've been through it, that's an incredibly powerful healing. I've been hearing this for weeks, and more the government even is getting to the point where they understand that it's an important thing. So
this year, MDMA is going to be legalized for therapeutical. It's not legalized in the streets, but it's combined with some sort of, like, while you're under it, they do a therapy. They talk to you and they get you talking, I guess. Like I said, I don't know how it works, but it is going to be legalized for medical use sometime here in 2024. I don't know when it is, but
Yeah, you kind of touch on a point that in my gut, I believe you mentioned how it seems like the biology of the fungus knows the injured biology of the individual and is able to transform it and heal it in that process. And I personally believe that us humans have a tendency to fuck with nature's natural ability to heal when we try to manufacture something in a lab.
yeah, I mean, look, they already have a synthetic version. I really don't understand why they haven't legalized it. LSD is actually the synthetic version of psilocybin. It's now man-made, and if it's the same thing, and again, I've heard from people say that it works. I don't know how or what they do. I've only talked to one other person that has any knowledge of that. But if that's the case, why hasn't Pfizer put it in a bottle yet? I mean, our laws are built based off of what they push for.
Well, speaking from experience, those two things are actually very different in terms of how you experience them.
Yeah, I don't know how the trips work. The person I talked to was just saying that that's the closest.
Molecularly, they're very similar. I get the idea, but the actual experience of a non-natural derived synthetic versus there's a quality to them that's different. I think really the context is that the neurology becomes receptive again. You become programmable at that point. And so the key is the context. You need to be with healers in a space that's physically and spatially conducive to you going through whatever process you go through, so that you can arrive at an open place again. Right. I wish more and more that we could help people who have come back from war solve this issue for themselves and to create the lives they want to create. I notice that we're getting short on time. So I want to ask you, how do people find the Heroes Voice Media Foundation, and what other ways to contact you are there?
So real quick, Heroes Voice Media Foundation, we have 3 projects, right? There's the podcasting, and there's the radio station, and then we have our last program called Words from Warriors. It's for helping our authors get published and so forth. If you want to listen to the radio station, which is one of the things that we really, really need is listeners, it's free. You go to veteranvoiceradio.com, and there's links to our country station that's called Simplify Country, our rock station called Ranger Rockwave, and then our mixed genre called Vet Mix. So you can listen to it that way. The app's being built. It'll be out shortly. And if you want to read some of these books, or if you want to purchase my book, you can go to wordsfromwarriors.org. You can find all the links to purchase my book and a bunch of other veteran authors that have wrote books about their experiences as well. If you have Roku, our podcasting program also has a Roku channel. You can go there, just go to the store, search Military United Podcast Streams, and you'll be able to watch the two different things that we have on there. We have all of our podcasters on there, and then we have what's called MMTV, Military Music Television, and it's all the artists that are on our radio station that have created music videos. So
we'll do our best to include a lot of those links when the show comes out.
Absolutely.
Greg, we have time for the one last question. Will you bring it for us?
All right. Donald, just Memorial Day coming up. Very grateful for you sharing your presence with us today and sharing the spirit of your brothers and sisters you've been shoulder to shoulder with.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome. So our final question, Eminem or Foo Fighters?
Eminem.
That was quick.
Yeah, I love Eminem. Yep. Eminem.
Do you want to say more about why?
You know, I really don't know why. I think more so just because he seems to be authentic, man. His music, his writings, they seem to be real. They're about his life, you know. When his life was turning shit, guess what? So did his music. And he had that 3 or 4 CD where it was nothing more than him talking shit about people and how much he hated life. And then his music got good again when he got good. So I think it's kind of represents me, man. You know, I've had good times and I've had bad times. When my music's shit, I'm shit.
Well, I want to thank you for your transparency, for your commitment to creativity. I can't wait to listen to this music. Thank you so much for what you're doing, for the way you're showing up for yourself and for your family and for everyone else who's facing these issues.
I appreciate it. And again, thank you guys for giving me a platform to talk.
Our pleasure.
Recording stopped.